if you run, that'd be great, because my friends and I could actually be voting for someone instead of against somebody. And part of that for them goes back to your thing on trust and integrity. When I grew up in this town in North Dakota, 300 people, my grandparents had started the grain elevator there. A grain elevator receives grain from farmers in the fall, and they bring it in one truckload at a time. And the farmland doesn't change hands. So the farmland in that area is now owned by the grandkids and the great-grandkids, the people that were the customers of my grandparents when they started. I got a nephew who's now, leading this organization, fourth generation. It was founded in 1906. When I was about 7 years old, my dad took me up into the driveway where the trucks come in and they unload, and they bring in one truckload at a time. Each truckload, you take a sample. When you take a sample of that wheat that's coming in, for example, depending on how you take the sample of it flowing out of the truck, you can either take one that's got the most wheat possible, or you can take one that's got the most chaff. And my dad said, look, we build trust one transaction at a time, one truckload at a time. And then we do that for a season, then you do it for a year, and then you do it for a decade, and then you do it for a generation. Because I said, well, why are these people hauling their grain from 20 miles away and going through 2 other towns to get here? And they said, well, somebody screwed Grandpa 2 decades ago, and they're never hauling their grain back there again. And now that, it goes to the son, and then the son and the grandkids. I don't know why we don't go there. We've always gone here. I mean, it's like it gets passed down for generations. My whole life has been around living in when you grow in a small community, in transparency, integrity, and trust is critical to what you do. The whole business that we built, Great Plains Software, we started with 10 kids, we built it into 2,000, a global organization with 2,000 team members, 10,000 plus partners, hundreds of thousands of customers all over the world. That whole business model was built on trust. Okay, thank you. He said he was a customer, so that's great. And we had partners here, we had team members in New Hampshire, but that whole model was built on trust. One of the things that we have brought in our role when we've been the commander-in-chief of the National Guard in North Dakota, when we've been leading that state, is trust and integrity and transparency. It's so important, because when you're in the executive branch, if you want to go to Washington D.C. and be in Congress and put on a red jersey or a blue jersey and lob bombs and tweet at each other and do that, great. But the executive branch actually has to run something. I'm an operating guy. That's all they've ever done is operate stuff and operate it well. That's how I knew to take $1.7 billion dollars out, and it still operated. I'm an operating guy. And when you're running the executive branch, it's not. Yes, I'm a conservative, fiscal conservative policies, all that stuff. But guess what? In North Dakota, people that may not agree with me politically, we plow the roads for them. We plow the roads for Democrats. We plow the roads for independents. They go to our schools. We deliver health care services. You got to work for everybody, and people in North Dakota know that. That's why we got reelected by over 40 points, because they said, wow, these guys, I believe what he says, and if he says something not right, he's accountable when things don't go wrong. This is what leadership is all about. Leadership isn't about name calling to other people. It's not about who can come up with the quippiest quip. It's about, none of you would pick a CEO for your company. You wouldn't pick a superintendent. You wouldn't pick a passer. You wouldn't pick a coach for your granddaughter's third grade soccer team, by saying who can dish out the biggest insults at somebody else the quickest. That's not how you pick leadership. I don't know how we even got to this spot. You all know what leadership is when you've seen it, and leadership is about trust. It's integrity. It's about execution. It's about delivering, and it's about bringing out the best of people. And it's about understanding who our real enemies are, because we got real enemies. We're in a cold war with China, proxy war with Russia, proxy war with Iran. That's our real enemies. We've got real challenges that are facing our nation right now. So I don't know how to, and ask different variants of this question before of what I would do, but I just have to tell you, it's so close to who I am about the integrity and the trust piece. I don't know how to answer it other than just tell you this is who I am and this is what I've been doing my whole life. And this is why on the day we announced, and I walked out on stage on June 7th, there was kids from my high school class there. There was kids from college, fraternity brothers and others. There was kids from grad school. There was people from the first business we started. We had partners and customers for Great Plains that drove across states and flew across the country to be there, because their lives were changed by the opportunities that we created for them. And so that's who I am. It's part of the reason why we're running. We've got to restore faith in our institutions, and it's got to start at the top. If you don't have trust in the leadership at the top, how do you trust any of the organizations that are going underneath that? But thank you. Ma'am?
So, my name is Barbara Naturally, and the question I have is about, Medicare. What can you do to help, the seniors with the price of drugs and the cost of the Medicare and things like that? I mean, it's some of the drugs are just ridiculous, the price of the drugs. And when you look at, say, Giants for diabetes, which there's a ton of people on that now, and even with the co-insurance, it's still like $135 a month. I mean, somebody that's on Social Security, how are you going to be able to afford that?
Well, there's so much wrong with healthcare in this country, and it starts with the fact, a lot of it starts with the fact that the federal government decided this was going to be their area of expertise. I mean, everybody's dealing with inflation right now. Inflation is, raised the cost of the average family about $700 a month since Joe Biden took office. It's $8,400 a year. And that, when they report those numbers, sometimes they exclude food and energy, which are the highest components when they say that piece. But if you go back to 2000 forward, the part of our economy that had the highest rate of inflation that whole time was healthcare. It didn't matter, what was going on, not going on. Obamacare, which is a non-actuarial sound insurance program that less than 10% of Americans use, but it was 100% of the news for more than a decade. But it didn't change the cost structure. But the federal government kept shoving more money, keeps subsidizing into it. They did a bunch of stuff where they were subsidizing software, which then they subsidized electronic healthcare records. I mean, there's $1 trillion consumed of IT expense into the healthcare, and at the end of that decade, doctors were seeing fewer patients per day than they were at the beginning of that. The way you get prices down in an industry is you get productivity up, you get services up, and that happens through competition. So when the federal government is trying to do this thing, it's just awful. And it's like, so they got their hands in what was private sector with all the reimbursements. Then there's the VA, which has got challenges. Then take a look at it. They have another one, a federally run healthcare system. It's called the Indian Health Service. It serves the tribes in this country. It makes the VA look like the Mayo Clinic. And so if anybody thinks the federal government can run a healthcare system, go talk to a Native American that's trapped in that system, and you'll find out that that's not the answer. But on your question, so then how do we get the cost down? Part of it, we got to have transparency. It's the only thing. When you guys go to buy a car, you can actually see a sticker on the side of the car, used or new. This is what the car costs. You go in for healthcare, you have no idea sometimes what you're buying or what you're, and even if groceries are too high, you can look at the sticker and go, what's the price? I can't afford it or I can. But we've got no transparency in pricing. The drug issue, I mean, why does Canada have the same drug for a fraction of what we have? I mean, I talked to somebody the other day, and he just said, yeah, I stopped prescribing U.S. drugs. I just tell people because they're not enforcing it. I just give them, here's the address of a Canadian pharmacy. Go get the same drug for a fraction of the price. I mean, why are we offload? Why with our neighbor to the north, which is so close here to North Dakota and New Hampshire, why would we not figure out a way to have the kind of pricing that Canada does? So there's a bunch of stuff that I just call business operations related. Get the government out and get some common sense in, and we can absolutely take the cost down, just like we can. But part of this is it's not more government programs. Be like, oh, healthcare's out of control. Oh, we need Obamacare. No, healthcare's out of control. You need to get it back. So it's like other industries where they can actually deliver services. So it drives me crazy because I worked in the software field in healthcare for a while as a CEO, serving those services after Great Plains. We went to there's a national show of innovation in healthcare, and it had the most exciting things that were going on there. I mean, like thousands of new startup companies that were all going to take the cost out and improve services. And then along came this $1 trillion I'm talking about, where the federal government said every hospital and every clinic and every doctor has to use electronic healthcare records, and we're going to give you $30 billion to subsidize it to start. And then when they found out 2 years later people weren't using it, they said, "Oh, we're going to cut your Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements unless you start using it by a certain date." We've never forced an industry to buy a certain company's software until this one. Okay, we've never done that. And of course, those people that owned those software companies were big donors of Obama. And so it's all political payback in my mind. It wasn't like, oh, the best software wins. And then there was a bunch of promises about how that was going to allow you to move your medical records around. Have you guys ever tried to move your medical records around? When I blew my Achilles and I got an MRI in Milwaukee, when I was there for the debate, and then I'm like, I want to go to the doctor back home. They're like, well, no, but we can give you a CD, we can give you whatever. I'm like, what? It's like you can't just send an email file. I mean, what? It's 2023. Oh, well, they've got a different system than we do, so we can't move it around. And like, so I spent weeks trying to just get basic like imaging stuff moved around, which should take like 2 seconds to do that. Well, this is all. So anyway, I'm frustrated, but I tell you, at that innovation show, because of the subsidies and because of the penalties to use that, I went to that show 7 years in a row, and each year I went, there was less small businesses, less startups, less new innovations. They're all going out of business. All the venture money that went in to create innovation that would have lowered all of our healthcare costs and improved, all went out because all the capital went towards where the government was subsidizing. So there's two things that are wrong here. One is they were picking a winner that was a bad solution, and then they killed an entire industry. We lost a decade or more of innovation because of that, and it was all silent. Nobody reported on it. Nobody did. Just every year I'd go there and like, where are those guys? Oh, they went out of business. Because why? Well, 90% of every hospital budget was going towards implementing the electronic healthcare records. No one could do anything innovative. So I've just watched the government basically one thing after another raise the cost and lower the quality. And I don't know if any other candidate has actually seen it happen. I've seen it happen, and we've got to reverse that. If we can get back to driving innovation, then we can start lowering the cost, improving the services, get back to some negotiations, the PBMs, and all these other folks that are controlling drug prices. We just have to get in there and get it all fixed. But it absolutely has to happen. It's unaffordable.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, I'm a retired nurse, and it's just, having patients trying to jump through hoops to try to get their medications for them is crazy. So, but thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I want to just say, hey, look, some people have said, well, you're not going to win because your answers are too long. I'm sorry, I just know too much. I mean, I understand what the problems are, and I would know how to dig in there and figure. And I'm not Mr. Soundbite. You want Mr. Soundbite? You want someone to read a teleprompter? Go someplace else. But I actually get what's wrong with some of this stuff because I've lived it. So, sir.
Yeah, my name's Kevin, and I live up in Bedford, about 10 minutes from here. So I'm a veteran, and I appreciate gun rights, and I have 5 grown children who vote differently than I do, as yours do, and so I'm very empathetic to a broad range of people. But yet I get so frustrated with how the Republicans consistently get killed on abortion and gun rights, and I wonder how you would lead a conversation as a leader to move so there's less abortion and there's still free gun rights, but maybe not take the absolute hardest line that we have to have the biggest caliber rifles everywhere, and the most or an abortion that we have to, we get painted in the corner. I want less abortion, I want gun rights. How do you lead a conversation better than what normally happens out there? And case in point, Tuesday, young in Virginia, led on abortion, and that probably did not help. So how do we, as a party, how do we get less abortion in this country? And how would you lead that conversation?
Well, thank you for bringing that up, because that's important to the future of our party. Because we just lose in Virginia, we lost in Kentucky, we lost in Ohio, and I've been a member of the executive committee of the Republican Governors Association, and I've observed now over the last 6.5 years, I've had a chance to watch every gubernatorial race. And the executive committee, we raise money, we invest in gubernatorial races, and then you get to watch how the different strategies play out across every state in the country. And you're absolutely right. These two issues are not. They generate get out the vote for the other side, and they generate energy and they generate donations, and they're all tools that are used against us. And on the abortion piece, what I've said from the first day that I announced was, I'm the only candidate that said I will not sign a federal abortion ban. Everybody's up on stage, 15 weeks, 6 weeks, all this stuff. Like, no. Finally, I mean, the 10th Amendment, there's certain responsibilities that the federal government have been delegated to them by the states. States like New Hampshire, which was one of the original 13 colonies, when they wrote the Constitution, they said, this is the federal job. The federal job includes things like national security, which includes border security. So Biden administration actually literally not doing the job that's required in the Constitution. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff that are not specifically outlined that have to go back to the states. We have entire agencies at the federal level that are doing a job that was never intended to be done at the federal level. So part of it is get it back to the states. So what the Dobbs decision says is going back to the states. And they said, you won't sign a federal ban? I said, no, because if they're in power, then are they going to say we're going to do something against the Constitution? So first of it, that has to go back to the states, and that's where it has to reside. And it'll be different. It's going to be different. North Dakota's going to be different than New York, but each state's going to find their own. They're going to find their compromises at that level, and they'll either find them in the state legislature or they'll find them at the ballot box, like has happened in Kansas or Ohio. And we can stop trying to nationalize that debate, because it belongs at the local level and people can get involved there. And of course, if you want less abortion, there's a lot of things you can do. Streamline adoption services, do a better job on contraceptives. I mean, all the things that we focus on in North Dakota. If you say every abortion's a tragedy and late-term abortions are abhorrent, then what do you do to try to figure out to find that mix? So I think that conversation can be had. We've been doing it there, and it's going to happen at the state level. On the gun rights one, we've got an issue where we know that every American should feel safe going to school. Every American should feel safe going to a grocery store, and the issue is the mental health crisis. That's absolutely the issue. And then you say, but what about the guns or the types of guns? I don't think we can get to. You say, how do we have a conversation? I don't think we're in a spot right now in our party where because the data, the cities that have the toughest gun laws still sometimes have the highest crime rates and the highest thing, because guess what? They can get the gun someplace else. So we have to get back to solving this national mental health, behavioral health crisis we have, because there isn't a single mass shooting that's happened where someone doesn't have, I mean, every one of them, 100%, they got a mental or behavioral health issue, many times identified, many times untreated. And back to the question that was asked about our medical and insurance. I mean, I talked to a family just earlier this week, and they're like, yes, our family's getting crushed trying to get mental health care for our 17-year-old. They're paying $3,500 a month to try to get her the services, and their insurance company said, oh, we cover it, and they come up with every excuse they can, and they've gotten $20 back on a copay. And the mom's gone back to take a second job just trying to do that. Well, other families can't do that, and then you end up with youth that are struggling, and then we end up with the things that we see that happen, these horrible tragedies, and then we're focusing on the weapon as opposed to focusing on the fact. We have 32 million people in America are living with the disease of addiction, often not seeking treatment because of the shame and stigma associated with it. And there's 15 million kids in America that live in a household, 15 million live in a household where at least one of the adults in the household is struggling with the disease of addiction. If they are, then those kids are getting exposed to trauma. They have a more likelihood of themselves ending up in the criminal justice system. They have a more likelihood of ending up having the disease of addiction themselves. And then in our criminal justice system, which is a huge expense for our country, in our little state of North Dakota, I mean, it's a big physical state, we're the size of all 6 New England states, but little population. In North Dakota, we spend $500 million on our Department of Corrections rehabilitation. 80% of the people that are involved in that, and 80% of the people that are going through our court system have a substance abuse disorder. In the women's prison, it's 100%. So if we don't address the healthcare issues, then we can just keep paying for it quietly, paying for it, with the way we are in their criminal justice system. Think of When I interview judges in North Dakota, which I get to interview a bunch of them, I've appointed more than any other in the government history of the state. I ask them how much of the time that you've spent as a prosecutor, a defender, a judge advocate, the kind of things that would get them to the point where they'd be in my office as a finalist, to be a judge. How much of the work you've done in criminal justice is related to the disease of addiction? I've never had an answer below 80%. Think of taking 80% of the cost of what we spend on jails and courts and move that towards behavioral health and healthcare. I mean, we'd stop a lot of shootings. Absolutely, we would. So anyway, it's a systemic problem, and we got to move our focus upstream. Right.
Continue with why do we need automatic rifles? Why do we need that?
The question was, why do we need automatic rifles? And I'm not. I think need is an interesting question. Because for some families maybe no, others no. But I know that any effort, whether it's Obama or Biden or anybody that says we're going to take away gun rights, we're going to eliminate a certain category of guns, I know what happens is gun sales go up. So if you want to have more automatic rifles in this country, like unbelievably a lot more, then start talking about we're going to take them away from people, because all the manufacturers will, hey, look, they're going to take them away, but you better buy them now because they're going to grandfather them in. I mean, we've had ammo shortages, we've had gun shortages. Gun sales go up when the Democrats are in the president's office, because if they make comments like this, they threaten stuff like that, and then it just goes up. It does exactly the opposite. We need to understand, people have to feel like we're not taking away your gun rights. You don't have to run out and arm yourself. You don't need, all these weapons, because look, it's constitutional right. It's there. Don't worry about it. Now let's talk about how we stop the murders and stop the mass shootings and start focusing on that, because if you start with taking away guns, you get the opposite thing that you're looking for. Sir?
My name's Todd from Merrimack. Thanks for coming, sir. My question's about energy policy. We're very imbalanced in energy policy in the United States. California's mandated that 100% electric car sales by 2030. Virginia's trying to mirror that. The current president supports that. We don't have that infrastructure here. We have 3 grids in the United States, east, west, and Texas, and none of those grids can support everyone in this room driving home at the end of the day and plugging their car in. Not only do we not have electric power generation, it's very difficult to build a power plant in the United States, but our transmission lines and our transformers don't support that electric draw. As president, my question is, what are you going to do to get us into some sort of balanced parity of phasing in alternative power, and how are we going to address trucking? The people that come to your family's grain elevator may not have places to stop and plug in their electric trucks when they're driving 40 miles round trip back and forth to the field. So how, as president, would you address that, sir?
Well, thank you for that question. I would say my first thing was stop the madness. The whole Green New Deal fantasy, which $400 billion of it got buried into that infrastructure, spending bill, is absolutely insane. It's insane because it doesn't make, as you pointed out, it doesn't make any sense from a common sense standpoint. It doesn't make any sense from an economic standpoint. It does not make any sense from a physics standpoint, because your physics involves moving electrons around, and A, we don't have enough of them, and B, we don't have the transmission. And then it doesn't make any sense from a national security standpoint, because we're basically trading OPEC for Sinopec, because China controls 85% of the rare earth minerals that you need to make the batteries. And if you care about the environment, which is the whole thesis is, we should all be embracing EV because it's great for the environment. You have to look at the whole system. China is building batteries and solar panels in factories in China powered by coal. They're opening up 1 coal plant a week. They have 260 permitted. They will open more. We could shut down every one in America right now, and we could just go to blackouts and brownouts tomorrow, because there's many days when 40% or more of the base load in America is still coming from thermal generation of coal, which, by the way, in North Dakota, we can take out the NOx, the SOx, the CO2. I mean, we can take all the emissions that people are concerned about. We can get all that out. You can have thermal base load from fossil fuels and not have it be an environmental problem. That's called innovation. That's called solving the real problem as opposed to attacking an industry. So we know we can do that. But if we outsource it and we say we're going to get it from China, and China's the world's largest polluter, their CO2 emissions are going up every week. Ours in the United States, we've lowered ours more than any other country. Why are we the villain? Why do people think we're doing a bad job? We're doing the best job, and they're doing the worst job. But then somehow we're going to be dependent on somebody that we're actually moving closer and closer to a potential global conflict with. I mean, it makes no sense on at least 5 levels. I mean, I just can't make any sense of it. I just saw an article the other day. You talked about transmission. You talked about the grids. Well, North Dakota, we sit right in the middle. We're the center of North America. We're on the grids. SPP to the west, MISO to the east. Both of those grids from North Dakota. We export so much electricity out of our state to keep the lights on, every place else. We know that we also got a ton of wind. I mean, we're a huge energy producing state. We have a ton of wind. We had days last year in the middle of the winter for 3 days when it was 20 below. And those wind turbines were supposed to be providing 35% of the power going to SPP. They were providing less than 1%. You can't have days in the middle of the winter where you lose 35% of your power. I mean, we'd have people as far away as Michigan would be like, oh, we better turn on the generator at our hospital because we don't have enough power to run the thing. Kids can't go to school today. There's no electricity. We are so dependent on having clean, reliable, cheap electricity. The plan that they have, and as you said, there's not enough juice to plug in every car, and then the local transmitter in your little neighborhood, those things are supposed to last like 20 years. You get everybody in your neighborhood plugging in a car, they're going to last about 2 years. Guess what? We don't make enough transformers. Guess what? We'd be dependent on a foreign source for transformers. I saw an article just the other week. You know what's exploding in price? You know what one of the hottest stocks in America was last year? Companies that make wooden telephone poles. Okay, and we're like, who needs a wooden telephone pole? Well, it's because it's like, well, we all got cell phones. No, the Biden administration, we're going to subsidize high-speed internet and we're going to subsidize electricity to get the last mile off these transmission lines. These companies are out of control. Everybody's trying to sell the best 40 and 45-foot wooden southern pine pole. They're selling them at record high prices. One of the company's stock is up 91% because you can't get enough because we're going to run power lines everywhere, to try to get all this stuff to everyone's house. You can't get right here in New England, you can't get BlackRock's been trying for 10 years to get 100% green Quebec hydro running down through Maine to New York at the time when New York's trying to shut down their nuclear plant, and we can't get that because you can't get the permitted. And then all of you are stuck here in New Hampshire has the highest percentage of people who burn heating oil in their homes to heat their homes. At the time of the Russian invasion, it's 41% in New Hampshire. At the time of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we were offloading into New England 400,000 barrels of oil a day equivalent of dirty Russian heating oil because you can't get a pipeline built from the Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania because New York won't allow it, the federal government won't support it. It's a national security risk. We have to be able to get our own energy from Pennsylvania to New Hampshire, right? I mean, there's no reason. If you cared about the environment, you should be out there saying, I'm not going home until that pipeline's completed, because that would reduce emissions. Natural gas, U.S. versus Russian heating oil. I mean, do the emissions. I mean, that Russian heating oil had to come all the way across Siberia, then had to come across America. I mean, it's like, why can't, if you really care about CO2 emissions, we should all be on the same page. It would be, we're going to do it all here, and we're going to build the infrastructure. But now I say pipeline, you say protest. I mean, it's just nutty. I mean, the things that have gone on. I mean, the Keystone XL, Biden, first day in office, said, I'm canceling that thing. Think of a project that's going on in New Hampshire. Think of a building, a new hotel. I mean, pick any project that was legally permitted. The investors had made their investment. It wasn't an illegal activity. It's a legal product transferring a legal thing. That's all legal. And then the first day in office, you wake up and the president says, oh, I'm canceling the permits for that project. I'm going to put my finger on that one. I don't even understand that that's even legal. Why would that be legal? It's a legal product and it's a legal company with legal permitting. And he's like, no, we're going to. So I talked to the guys from that company in Canada that were building that, and I said, first of all, two things. When you redo it again when I'm president, it's not going to be called XL because people don't like pipelines. The thing they really don't like is extra large ones. So we're just going to drop that whole thing. And then the other thing is, instead of Keystone, we'll call it what it is. Call it the American Energy Security Pipeline. So when there's a protest, They're protesting again today for building the American Energy Security Pipeline, because that's what it is. I mean, if we can't move our resources around North America, and if we can't move it to our own states, I mean, you can't get a pipeline built from Texas to California. They're offloading foreign oil in Long Beach half the time, and the state that's trying to outlaw internal combustion machines has the most number of internal combustion cars in the country. Okay, other than that, I don't care about it that much.
Governor, we have time for one more question. Time for one
I'll
more.
take one more, okay. And if this can be a yes or no question, that'll be faster. Anything, any topic? Right here. Sir, thank you, thanks for coming.
Jim from Litchfield, you talked about addiction and all the nations have it. What's going to be your national strategy for drug control?
Well, first I want to say that this is the disease of addiction is close to every family. I mean, it touches every family, every community, and every company in our nation, and no more than right now. But I just want to say on behalf of the First Lady, Catherine, she's struggled with the disease of addiction for 2.5 decades, and I'm proud to say, and she would say if she's here today, she'd say, hey, I never thought I was going to be First Lady of anything, because that wasn't necessarily in our plan when we were the outsiders. But she would also say, I would never thought I'd be standing in front of all of you publicly sharing my recovery. She's celebrating now 21 years in recovery. So thank you. This morning I had a chance to visit Liberty House in Manchester. It's a sober living facility for veterans. They're doing a fantastic job. They're not just focused on recovery. They're focused on mental and physical health. They're focused on meaningful employment and financial understanding, and then they're focused on getting people back to independence. I mean, that is a great thing. Guess what? They don't get any federal money. That's a people donating and neighbors helping neighbors, and it's a super effective, great little program. But the policy, part of the policy on we have is, first thing, we got to close the border. I mean, this is. I've been down to the border more times than Joe Biden. I've been down there more than Vice President Harris. And when you're down there, I'm not down there for a photo op. I'm down there to see North Dakota National Guard troops that are serving on the border, and I'm down there to get briefings from the Customs and Border Patrol. These are lifetime law enforcement, sometimes multi-generational families. And on the last visit, when I was just down there at the end of August, it's just hard to imagine. 6.5 million people have crossed into our country that we have gotten papers since Joe Biden took office. That's every man, woman, and child in Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Joe Biden's home state of Delaware, and then throw in Montana. Think if those states had 0 people 3 years ago, and now they have the population. Like, go outside and go, imagine that 3 years ago there was nobody here, and now everybody's here. But then multiply that times 6 states, 6.5 million people. But then you're in the briefing, and they have another number up there that says, oh, well, that's the known gotaways. 1.5 million known gotaways. So it's like, how are they known and how did they get away? Well, the Biden administration has all the people that joined to do law enforcement, at these soft-sided facilities, AK tents, AK temporary, because we don't have physical facilities to manage 6.5 million people coming through. So they're in tents. Some of this one facility was costing $20 million a month that we were spending to got to get them out, because there's more people coming. We got to just move them into the U.S. I mean, that's kind of their assignment. So if you're a Customs Border Patrol and you went into law enforcement, if you can take early retirement, you took it. You're gone. Why would I went into law enforcement. I didn't say I want to do paperwork. I wanted to protect the border. I didn't want to help people get into the country who aren't following the rules. And so they're all demoralized. It's like talking to a group in a big blue city where they've been defunded and been disrespected. I mean, the Biden administration is effectively defunding the Border Patrol, even though they don't say it out loud. But if they're not giving them the tools and the resources to do their job, and then on the other side with the cartels, I mean, stand right on the Rio Grande, they point up, they look, that house over there, that's a cartel house. That house, that's a cartel house. Big, beautiful, 2-story things with like bridge workarounds. So the guys up there with binoculars, they got drones, they got money. And then see people walking across, we're standing there, they're walking across. They know they're going to get apprehended, but they're just walking across. Yes, well, they've traveled and now they've paid because the cartels, people don't just walk across. If there's a low water crossing, a cartel controls it. And if they've got $100 left, if they have $1,000 left in their pocket, the cartel takes it. That's the price for you to cross. You can't cross here. We'll tell you when you can cross. Okay, you can cross. They're extorting everybody that's coming into our country. So they've got funding on their side. We don't have funding. We're being defunded, and the other guys are pulling in, literally in some cases, tens of millions of dollars a week. It's the most absurd thing you can imagine, and it's never in the paper. It's never reported. It's like got to be the most unreported story in the world that this is happening. And then how do you have a known gotaway? Well, we have cameras, but there's nobody out there watching, so they just see them come across, and then that's how they count the known gotaways. I said, well, but we have cameras everywhere, and they say no, because sometimes the bad guys knock out the cameras. I said, so then we also have unknown gotaways. Oh yeah, how many are those? Well, they're unknown. We don't know. Well, if you're the really bad guys, well, then you would probably go where you know there are no cameras. And guess what? On the increase on the terrorist watch list of people that have entered the country that we know of is way up. And in the sector that I was in, it wasn't just part of the 7.5 million people that have fled the corrupt government of Venezuela. There was over 100 countries, including every country you can imagine: Syria, Iran, North Korea, China, Russia. These are every country that is like this, wants to wipe out America, is on the list of people who've entered our country. And so the chance of us having a Hamas attack or some kind of 9/11 event in the next 5 to 10 years because of people that came across when Joe Biden was letting people in, I think it's gone up. I'm sorry to say our country's less safe. So job number one, the question is all the way back to this: why am I talking about the border? We've had since Joe Biden took office, we've had the equivalent of 5 Vietnams worth of overdose deaths. 5 Vietnams. We're closing in on 270,000 overdose deaths since he took office. That's 300 a day. If a plane went down today with 300 people, you'd all know about it. If a plane went down again tomorrow with 300 people, you'd know about it. If a plane went down the next day, you'd all be like, I'm not going to work, I'm calling my kids and my grandkids. Nobody gets on a plane until we find out what's going on and what thing is. But no, when we lose them one at a time, and these are sons and daughters and nieces and nephews, and probably somebody has lost a family member, and they may not even have been struggling with the disease of addiction. It could be the first time they took something. We met a family where their son bought a $30 Percocet. They had dinner with him. He went up to his room, he took the pill, and then the next morning they thought he was sleeping in. The mom went into his bedroom and found him dead in the bedroom. And so it's like this is part of this is what's happening. These are poisonings, and I've been saying that for years. Somebody said it on the debate stage the other night. Thank you. But we've been saying it for years. These aren't all overdoses. These are poisonings that are happening. So we got a mass invasion of people, and then we got mass casualties of a lot of our young people that are happening because of this. So we've got, number one, secure the border. And they say, well, how would you do that? Well, you would do that because the Border Patrol will tell you when you're down there with them, hey, we've secured the border before. Why does America think we can't secure it? Just give us the orders, give us the resources, give us the staffing. They're down about 2,000 people in staffing because they can't fill the positions because who would want to go in there? Just give it. But I would also I'd give them diplomatic, I'd give them informational, I'd give them military backup if they need that, and then economic sanctions to these countries. And then again, you got to go do. I mean, Venezuela, 7.5 million people leaving because they've got a corrupt government. Hey, how about we do something down there as opposed to just let them into the country up here? So that part we can fix. But then on the drug piece, we've got to also do something on the demand side. And we've got this issue I talked about earlier with 32 million Americans with, facing the disease of addiction. But we've got to figure out a way to drop demand. And part of that is, again, behavioral health, mental health, strong economy, all these things to create opportunities for people, strengthening the family. That's got to be a holistic approach in our country. But right now we're, it's like people talk about the war on drugs. Drugs won. Drugs are winning. Fentanyl's winning. I mean, it's like this idea that we've had for the last 40 years that somehow we're going to win this thing. We keep losing, and now we're losing worse than ever. And it would have to be a priority, absolutely, because it's the thing that's it's touching. Like I said, it touches every family, every city, and it's not. And this is what is hard. Our country's going to have to learn how to solve things, because those overdose deaths are happening to independents, Democrats, and Republicans. It's happening to rich people, and it's happening to poor people. It's happening across the whole spectrum. Not every problem we face as a country falls into a neat bucket of two political parties shouting at each other. We actually, if we couldn't come together and say, as America, do you want Americans? Forget your political affiliation. Do you want to stop losing our kids? Do you want to stop, going to funerals from people that died of a fentanyl poisoning? Couldn't we come together on that? I mean, I think this maybe is an issue that's so tragic that maybe we could actually use it to help unite people and bring back together, because I don't know, other than, yes, people turn the border open or closed into a political situation, but I don't know how you take the actual fentanyl poisonings and say that that's a political issue. I mean, this is an issue of us. Are we going to stand up as a country? Are we going to protect our youth and our next generations? Are we going to defend ourselves from fentanyl that's coming in from China? Are we going to do those things? But that takes leadership to be able to do that, and not part of leadership is solving problems, not politicizing things so that you can win the next election, or politicizing it so you can raise more money. It's actually going out and doing the work, and that's what we've done. That's what we do every day in North Dakota. We work for everybody. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
And appreciate you turning out. Some of you I've seen multiple times. Thanks for coming back. We'd love to have your support. DougBurgum.com. Love to earn your vote when the voting happens. We're on the ballot. We're going to be here all the way through January. And if you've got the next time we're around, bring your friends, bring family, come join us. And then lastly, I'm going to be sticking around for a little bit. Maybe wants to grab a photo. Happy to do that. I know there's some folks that came that are outside that didn't get a chance to get in here to do that. I want to get outside there and make sure I can say hi to all of them and thank them for coming as well. Thank you guys for getting here early and getting a seat. And again, happy Veterans Day. Thank you and congratulations. Thank you to all of our veterans.